Hello and welcome to GearHeads. My name's Jesse and today we're going to be doing ball joints on this 2005 Chevy Silverado. This is pretty much going to be the same for the GMC Sierras. The first gen and the second gens are almost exactly the same. So this covers a wide ear range. Let me just show you real fast how bad this ball joint is and show you what it looks like and how to test for it. If you want more information for shaking down a front end suspension and steering, I did a video on a Jeep Cherokee. Obviously it's not exactly the same thing. That's a solid axle. This is an independent suspension, but it does show you a lot of similar things to look for and you'll get the point. So I'll put a link to that in the description if you want a more well-detailed way to do an inspection. But let's go ahead and take a look at this ball joint and then we'll get to replacing them. So first you're going to want to lift the corner that you're inspecting by the lower control arm, and then we're going to slide a pry bar underneath here. Go ahead and watch that lower ball joint. Let me get the camera set up. We're going to watch that guy right there. So once you got the tire a couple inches up in the air, lifted by the lower control arm, go ahead and slide the pry bar underneath here. Look at how much that tire is moving. You can feel the big clunk with your left hand when you hold the top of the wheel, because you just want to hold the center so that the tire doesn't spin while you're pulling on the pry bar. In any case, I'll show you the video from the inside. This ball joint is shot, needs to be replaced, as soon as possible, which is why we're doing it now. So in any case, let's go ahead and get this thing up in the air. Obviously, I have a lift. I'm going to use it, but there's no reason you can't do this job on the ground at home with some jack stands and a good jack. Okay, so I'm not going to give a full list of every tool you need before the job starts. We're going to figure it out as I go. I'll tell you what I'm using. But for sure, you're going to need a ball joint press kit. This is a master set from Astro. They sent me to review, so this is the second time I'll be using it. I'll be doing a separate video reviewing it. Anyways, after I do this job on it as well. And then I highly recommend getting some kind of half-inch gun, whether it's an electric like this Milwaukee, or if you have a compressor at home, then use an air compressor with a half-inch gun. Those are a lot cheaper if you have a compressor. It just makes everything so much faster. You can do this with regular ratchets. You can use the ball joint press with like a big half-inch ratchet. It's just going to take more time and it might fight you more. So in any case, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and just yank the wheels off both sides and then we'll start disassembling, and I will show you step by step as I go. Alright, so the first thing I like to do is take a large C-style clamp, just barely give a couple half turns or so to squeeze the caliper piston back, and that just makes it easier once you have the bolts for the caliper bracket off, just to pull the whole thing off so it doesn't stick to the rotor. Next, we have the ABS speed sensor wire, the wheel speed sensor wire. You're going to want to take a small screwdriver like this, and you can pop this little, there you go, that little retainer loose, and that sits up on the A-arm. Let me show it to you a little bit better. So after clamping down that caliper just a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the ABS wire from the mounts up here. So take a small flathead screwdriver, just slip it in the teeth of this guy, and it'll pop right open, just like that. And then this one here, I like to use needle nose pliers just to pinch the teeth on this. Let's see if I can get it pinched properly. There we go. And then that guy comes out. Now the reason I did that is because first off, this has got to come out anyway, and secondly, it gives me room when I get the caliper off to actually move it over, and I like to hang them up here in the front area, just completely out of the way. Alright, so this here, it's a 18 millimeter for the caliper bracket, so don't take the slider bolts off. You want to take the caliper bracket bolts off, which is right here. Oh, whoopsies. I don't know how that got turned around. And the top one. Alright, so don't let your caliper fall. You don't want to put too much pressure on your brake lines, especially if they're a bit older. So what I like to do is go ahead and pull the caliper off, and then I take the caliper bracket bolts. I just start them back into the bracket here just so that you don't lose them. I don't like setting things in piles on the floor that aren't organized. So you can always bag and tag too, that's another method. Alright, now that you got your caliper bracket off, there is one thing I kind of forgot, so let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and temporarily hang this on that. Okay, so you're going to want to have some mechanics wire. You can buy caliper hangers. The next thing I was going to say though, you need a 10 millimeter and just pop this brake line mount off. There we go. All right, so take that 10 mil. I'm just going to start it in just a couple threads, just like I did with the caliper bolts. There we go. And now I can go ahead and take the caliper over, move it. I mean, you can do it however you want. You can hang it wherever you want, but I like to hang them over here so they're well out of my way and I don't have something that I'm fighting in my workspace. All right, so I'm just got the caliper hanging up over there out of the way. Now let's go ahead and take the rotor off. At least on this truck, this is a, let's go ahead and straighten this up for you. So on this truck, it's a T30 Torx. Oh, come on. Try my electric ratchet. Oh, good. We got one that's pretty tight. I don't want to risk stripping it, so I'm actually going to go ahead and just go for a bigger gun because I feel like I'll have better luck that way than if you try and hold the rotor still and use a ratchet. You never know. Sometimes that's how things get damaged. There we go. That came right out. All I need is one hit from my 3/8 gun. And that definitely was tighter than it should have been. Usually you can pop those things out pretty easy, but somebody must have put it in a little extra tight. So I'm gonna go ahead and just set this in the rotor, put it on the floor. Okay, so now we're looking at the rest of the front end here. I'm gonna go ahead and take this off. You can disassemble the your ABS, wheel speed sensor wire. You can disconnect it up there and pull the whole thing down at the hub. Personally, I don't like to do that. I'm gonna take my, this is a 5 millimeter, actually, oopsies. This is a 5 millimeter Allen that goes right here. Come on, baby. And it's full of dirt. Let me clean the Allen out so I can actually get this in there without stripping it. Okay, so I cleaned this out. Now let's try and take it out. There we go. All right. And then wiggle this guy out. You don't want dirt falling down in there, so if it's really dirty around this area, make sure you clean it before you pull the speed sensor out. This one's wanting to stick. Usually if you get it loose, you just use a little flathead and pry up. It just has an O-ring that seals it, but it should just pop right out. There we go. There's that guy. So now what I'm gonna do is go ahead and just take this up around the top and swing it over the top of the shock and let it hang there out of my way. And then if you've got something, you can use a little tiny piece of a paper towel or something like that just to stuff in that hole. May as well show you since I'm working on it. Just pop that guy in there, keep any crap from falling in. If you're at home and don't have random, plugs like that, that's fine. Just stuff a piece of paper towel in there or something like that. All right, so now we're about ready to start disassembling more of the steering stuff and get the axle out of here. If you're a two-wheel drive model, you're gonna skip this part, but the rest of it's the same. So next, before you take the axles out, you're gonna wanna disconnect your sway bar because the end link here is gonna be in your way when you go to pull the axle boot out. So just take a pair of pliers at the top of the sway bar, and this one's a 14 millimeter at the bottom. There we go. And then you get your big long bolt out there. This guy, and then we can go ahead and just wiggle this right on out of the way. So next we're gonna go ahead and pop the axle out of here now that the sway bar links are out of the way. Take a small chisel or maybe a flathead and lightly go around this cup here. And once it starts to come away, you should be able to slowly just keep tapping so you don't bend it. You wanna be able to reuse it. There it goes. It's starting to come now. Now just go from the back angle and tap. There she goes. And then next you're gonna need a 36 millimeter for this axle nut.
Obviously my gun makes it easy. If you really need to, whoopsies, you can do this out of order, and before you even lift the car in the air, leave it on the ground, pop the caps off for the center, cover for the wheels, and you can take this off with it still on the ground, just so that you have an opportunity to break it loose if you need a breaker bar, because otherwise you're gonna have to find a way to hold the lugs, and if you put a pry bar or something through them to try and hold it while you're going the other way, you might damage these threads, which you don't want to do. Now let's see if it's seized. Nope. I can go ahead and I'm just pushing on the axle just to make sure that the stub's loose. So next we're going to need a 15 millimeter in here to take off the inside part of the axle where it mounts to the stub on the shaft. So the way I like to do it is use a gun and stand out here. There we go. And then grab a magnet tray. There we go. And then I just stand here and rotate it. So next you're going to go ahead and pull this CV shaft away from the differential axle extension over there. Pull it over towards the front where the sway bar end link was going to be in your way. And then just go ahead and push it back and pull it out. There you go. So next we're going to go ahead and deal with the ball joints and the tie rod. I'm just going to clean this area up a little bit. The upper ball joint boots are actually torn, but they don't have any play yet. So at that point, it's up to you whether you want to replace them or not. He doesn't want to do the extra, spend the extra money right now to do the upper arms and ball joints together. So we're just going to do the lowers for today. But yeah, it's really not hard actually just to do the uppers separate later once they actually do start to get play in them. The boot being torn does not mean it's bad. That just means it's not going to hold in grease as well. It might let dirt in there, so it probably will wear out faster. In any case, so we're going to need an 18 millimeter for the upper ball joint, an 18 millimeter for this guy right here for the tie rod, and a 24 millimeter, I believe, for the lower ball joint. So first, take that guy off. Now what I always do is take them off, thread them on just a couple turns. And then I got a universal joint for getting to the upper one up here. Lovely. All right. So if you have this happen to you, I mean, obviously that upper ball joint is spinning in there. Great. So now what I'm going to try and do is actually compress and clamp these two together to make that ball joint stick, because it's not going to want to come out. There's no, there's no hex at the bottom of that for me to get it off. I can try, I guess, one more time with the gun, just to see. But hold on. Yeah, that guy's just spinning. So here's what we're gonna do. Now, if you're replacing this, which, maybe we should think about doing, but it's not happening today either way. So, but if you are gonna replace this, go ahead and just use a pickle fork and jam that in there. And that'll start going to spread it apart, but what it'll also do is put enough pressure on the ball joint to keep it from spinning while you're taking that nut off. Since I'm not doing that today, I'm going to try and use my really big channel locks and see if we can squeeze them together. I'm going to basically go at it like this, but from the other side, and I'm going to try and squeeze this together while I am, hold on, I gotta spread the jaws just the right size. But I'm gonna squeeze it together to try and put pressure on that while I'm hitting it with the gun, and hopefully that'll allow me to get it off. Come on. I'm gonna see if putting pressure on the nut side like this will do it. We'll see. Put a pry bar up there. worked. Look at that. Now generally, I don't pop them all the way off like that. Like I said, I'm gonna just barely start it by just a couple thread turns here, so that when we do go to pop the hub loose, the whole thing doesn't just fall and smash your toes. And also that one popped off by itself. Generally speaking, once I get the nut off, if it's still stuck to it like that, I just smack the top of the spindle here with a sledgehammer, and usually they'll break loose that way. If that doesn't work, you can always use a pickle fork or some other kind of, you know, puller tool. Usually it's not necessary though. All right, next we're gonna go ahead and pull off the tie rod end. So same deal here basically. All right, so I'll put that on a couple threads. And let's just give this a nice whack with the sledgehammer, and usually they'll pop out. There we go, look at that, see? Pop loose. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take that nut off. Go ahead and thread it back on a couple turns so I don't lose it. And now we're gonna start hitting the spindle down here for the lower ball joint, and hopefully that'll pop loose without using, needing to use a puller or something. At this point, once you start hitting stuff like that with a hammer, I mean, I could have been wearing them already, but it's always smart, especially when you know you're gonna be getting aggressive with the sledgehammer, to put on some safety glasses, because once you start hitting things hard, little bits of metal can go flying. So, yeah, I mean, look at that. Look at how much plays in that ball joint. You can see it just, when I go to turn right here, you can see the spindle lifting up. But let's see if I can get it to break free. The backside. All right. Part of the problem is, because the ball joint's so bad, it's moving when I hit it with a sledgehammer, which is absorbing a lot of the impact instead of, you know, letting it just bust free. All right. I think it actually might have busted free. It might just be hanging because of this upper control arm. There we go. Okay, so it did actually break free. This upper control arm just had so much pull on it, because I don't know, they don't like to hang. They always want to pull back up once you have the car up in the air like this. So it was actually holding the spindle up in the air. So now, let's go ahead and unthread this guy. There we go, and now the spindle is off. Okay, so on some of these trucks, generally at least on the 25 and 3500s, I've seen a lot of times they have a, I'm not seeing it here, but they'll have a snap ring that holds the ball joint in. There's so much dirt and grime here, I couldn't tell. So doesn't look like this one's got a snap ring, but it's gonna press out through the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my ball joint press set up, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So I'll just tell you right off the bat, some of these ones can be a pain, because as you can see on the front side of this, there's nowhere to grab for the ball joint press. So you're gonna need a cup like this, depending on what kind of ball joint set you buy. It may or may not come with one. I'll make sure to put a link in the description to the kit I'm using. It's Astro Tools Master Ball Joint Set. I've been pretty happy with it so far. I've used it to press a few ball joints and bushings. So that one looks like it's gonna work. It's gonna grab onto the control arm back behind the ball joint. And then there's a hole in the bottom, obviously, so that the rod has somewhere to go. And next, I'm gonna go ahead and get the actual ball joint press piece. I always like to lubricate these. WD-40 works fine. I'm sure there's better oil out there, but I've had good luck using WD-40. Just get it nice and lubricated before each use. And we're gonna end up setting it up something like this. So let me get the cup in there and see how it presses out. Hopefully it goes smoothly. All right, so I got it somewhat set up and get it snugged down with my fingers before I grab a gun to hit at it. And then always get it snugged up with your fingers, and then go underneath and make sure you've got a good bite, and make sure your cup's, you know, located somewhere where it's gonna grab on well and not be in the way. Because if your cup's, you know, moved a little bit left or right, it might be, you might be pressing on the cup instead of the ball joint itself, trying to push the ball joint out against the press. You don't want to do that. All right, so 22 millimeter at the top of this guy here. And let's see what happens. Now, if you know ahead of time you're going to be doing this job, it's never a bad idea to clean this area up before you disassemble anything a few days ahead of time. Spray it with some WD-40. Obviously, I'm in California, so I don't have to deal with rust and stuff too much. And this truck's not, not too rusty at all. This is all just grime. So hopefully this one comes out. If it does not, and you're dealing with something that has a lot of rust and it's been in there forever, definitely try and soak it ahead of time with penetrating oil or WD-40. And then also you can always heat this end of the control arm up with a torch, get it nice and hot, and then if it still doesn't want to come loose, then put some pressure on it with the press, get it nice and hot, and then smack it with a hammer while you're, while you have pressure on it with this press. But let's see if this one presses out. I hope it does. Yep, look at that. Piece of cake. Yeah, so there she is, and there's a huge amount of wiggle there. Even just with my hands, I can move it back and forth. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the other side out also, and then start prepping and put the new ones in. All right, next, before we start prepping to put the new ball joint in, we're gonna wanna make sure we clean this out. There's a bit of rust and stuff in here, so I'm just gonna hit it with a steel brush. All right, that's good enough. The inside's nice and shiny and clean now. So next you're going to get your ball joint out of the box. These are the Napa Proformer ones. I personally would not recommend them. If you can afford it, buy the Napa chassis line, is a lot better quality. The part number for the one I would recommend is TTX TXK6540. Let's see if I can get that to focus for you. Anyway, those ones are a way better quality. This is an old truck. He's not too interested in putting too much money into it, but those ball joints were so bad they had to be done. So these will at least be way better than the ones that came out. So the ones that were in here were probably the factory ones or their factory replacements, because they did not have cotter pins for the lower part, for the lower nut that goes on, and then also they did not have the snap ring for the top. This one comes with a little baggie. It's got a Zerk fitting in it, so that's at least nice. You can grease these, that'll help them live longer. And then it's got a snap ring, so we'll pop that in after we get the new one pressed in. And then it also has a cotter pin for the castle nut, since that's the style that this one uses. Sometimes you can get them with nylock nuts instead, but either way works. All right, so here's the problem I'm having. When we go to press this new ball joint in, we're gonna be pressing in obviously from the bottom up, and we're gonna need to grab the lip right here with one of these tools to press it up. On the top side, we're gonna use this little cup. That's smaller than the diameter of this, so we put that over the hole in the top of the control arm. You'll see how that works once I get to that point. But as far as pushing the thing up goes, you're gonna need a ring that fits right on this guy right here. This one's too small. That's gonna mess your boot up. The middle-sized one here, like these three are like the standard ones that come in almost every set. This one works, but look at how much play there is there all the way around the edge. I don't like that, because what that's gonna do is when you go to press it in, it might wanna walk left or right a little bit, and then it's gonna start trying to push the ball joint in at an angle, and then you're gonna have real problems because it's gonna catch. Anyway, so I was looking through the rest of these. None of them really are a perfect fit. This one's basically same issue. Too much play around the edges. This guy right here was the only one I found that fit. So it goes on like that. Now this one gave me a whole nother problem though, because it's so long, longer than it really needs to be. By the time I get this on there, then I have the control arm somewhere around here, and then I put this cup on. I am then longer, look at that. Just as that sits right there, that doesn't allow enough room to actually get the control arm in there to get the thing started. So if you don't have any other tools, the ghetto way to do it could be just to get it set up like this, and you could slip this over the top of the control arm and wedge it in place so you can get this started. And then once you get this pressed in a little ways, you might have enough room then to back off, add this cup at the top so that you can press it in the rest of the way. But Astro Tools also sells another tool to solve this issue. Let me grab it and I'll show you. They have this guy, the Goliath ball joint extra large C-frame press. So let me go ahead and take it out of the packaging. So as you can see, it's basically the exact same tool as the other one. It's just considerably larger. I mean, look at those two guys next to each other. It's a lot bigger. So I'm gonna go ahead and lube the threads up on this one and get it set up, and then I will show you, those are the cups I'm gonna be using, the ones I already showed you. I'll get it set up on there, and you'll see how it goes. Before I start here, I'm gonna go ahead and spray this with some WD-40. You're welcome to use another kind of lube if you want. WD-40 has always treated me pretty well. And I'm gonna go ahead and lube the ball joint itself up as well. Set this cup up top. We're gonna make sure that that's centered so that if you pulled over too far, then your top of your ball joint's gonna hit this cup and it's gonna stop early and you're gonna deform this. You don't wanna do that. So make sure that cup is centered. I'm gonna hang this like this. And then this cup, the threaded rod is gonna push on this cup right here. So I'm gonna lift this up here, right close to where it's gonna get started. And then, oh man, look at that. Look at how much extra room I have with this Goliath press. Okay, now that this thing's all set up, you just wanna come in here and make sure that this is lined up straight. Make sure, once again, this guy's centered. And then, yeah, that's pretty much gonna be it right there. So, as long as your top's centered and the ball joint is going into the control arm straight, you shouldn't have any problems. So, go ahead and zoom it in. There we go. Whoop, there we are. One more thing that I forgot to mention, it's not applicable on this truck, but if you're doing this on a 2500 or maybe a different model year, a lot of the ball joints for these, instead of having the Zerk fittings centered in the top here, the Zerk fittings actually are right on the edge of the corner, and there'll be a little cutout in the control arm. You want to make 100% sure that before you get your ball joint pressed up into place, when you're jigging and setting the whole thing up, make sure that that is going to line up. Make sure that whatever edge the Zerk fitting is going to go on is going to line up with that little cutout so that you can go ahead and put your Zerk fitting in, and then you have easy access to it later when you want to go to grease them. All right, now with these being pressed in just like the factory ones were, you know, putting in this snap ring probably isn't required, because look at that. It's more of a safety than anything else. It's not even actually seated all the way down. But you want to make sure you press that ball joint in all the way. So the fact that this is higher, you know, I don't know if some of them came with a little bit thicker control arms maybe, so that's what this is for. But it's pressed in, it's not going anywhere, but I may as well at least add the snap ring for safety. Okay, so that's how you get the new ball joints installed. Do the same thing on the other side. And then from here, it's pretty much reverse of removal. Put everything back together. Make sure you use your cotter pins when you put these in. I'll go ahead and film just putting it all back together. If I, you know, see anything or think of anything while I'm putting it back together, I'll make notes for you and let you know. But it should be pretty self-explanatory. All right, before you put your brake rotor back on, make sure you clean off your wheel speed sensor. Don't clip it in yet, but run it through the hole here. Let me take out the bolt and the little plug that I put in. All right, so after we get this guy in, Then you can go ahead and put your rotor on, then you can run the caliper back through, then you can pop this back into place. But do not put your sway bar end links in until the other side's back together too. It just makes it easier, because if you go to tighten this one down, when you install it, the other side's pulled down, you might not be able to fit the center section in there. So just do them at the same time, put them both in loose, then tighten it down all the way. So other than the sway bar end link, this side's all the way back together. I'm gonna go do the other side, then we'll put the sway bar end links in, and then we're gonna go around and grease. I'm gonna grease the brand new ball joints that I just put in, and we're gonna also clean up and grease the rest of the fittings he has in his steering. Just, you know, as a service, since we're already here. Okay, so I got the other side put back together. I got the sway bar links started, but not tightened down yet. You wanna make sure you get both of these end links in place before tightening them down. So let me get this guy set into place. I'm gonna run the long bolt all the way up through the middle here, out the top, and then get the top piece on here. All right, and then I got it started by hand. So now, I'm just gonna pull that down all the way so that the little insert goes into the sway bar, and then I can go ahead and tighten it down. All you really need for this is a set of pliers for the top, just to hold it from spinning. And if you got a gun, cool, use a gun. If you don't, use a ratchet, whatever. There we go. All right, and do the other side. All right, guys, that is how you replace ball joints on a first and also the second gen Silverados and Sierras. It's pretty much the same process on the two-wheel drives. It's pretty much the same process on the 25 and 3500s. There might be a couple little details that are different, but for the most part, like I said, same process, and you should be able to follow it. Now that everything's together, make sure you get a grease gun and go and grease your new ball joints. Don't over grease them to where it starts spitting out everywhere. Grease them until you start to see the boot just expand a bit, and you're good. I personally recommend using the Lucas oil, the red and tacky. That stuff's awesome. But that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go through all of his steering and suspension components right now and grease all those up. But for now, at least, that's pretty much it. The ball joint job is done. If there's something I happen to miss in this video, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'll pin it at the top. Sometimes I'll forget something as I'm, talking while I'm working. And of course, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment as well. I always try to get back to you and answer as many, as many comments and questions as I can. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, keep wrenching.